A Troublesome Visitor, a short story by Anton Chekhov. In the low-pitched, crooked little hut of Artyom, the forester, two men were sitting under the big, dark icon. Artyom himself, a short and lean peasant with a wrinkled, aged-looking face and a little beard that grew out of his neck, and a well-grown young man in a new crimson shirt and big, wading boots, who had been out hunting and come in for the night. They were sitting on a bench at a little three-legged table on which a tallow candle stuck into a bottle was lazily burning. Outside the window, the darkness of the night was full of the noisy uproar into which nature usually breaks out before a thunderstorm. The wind howled angrily, and the bowed trees moaned miserably. One pane of the window had been pasted up with paper, and leaves torn off by the wind could be heard pattering against the paper. "I tell you what, good Christian," said Artyom in a hoarse little tenor half-whisper, staring with unblinking, scared-looking eyes at the hunter. "I am not afraid of wolves or bears or wild beasts of any sort, but I am afraid of man. You can save yourself from beasts with a gun or some other weapon, but you have no means of saving yourself from a wicked man. To be sure, you can fire at a beast, but if you shoot at a robber, you will have to answer for it. You will go to Siberia. I've been forester, my lad, for 30 years, and I couldn't tell you what I've had to put up with from wicked men. There have been lots and lots of them here. The hut's on a track, it's a cart road, and that brings them, the devils. Every sort of ruffian turns up, and without taking off his cap or making the sign of the cross, bursts straight in upon one with, 'Give us some bread, you old so-and-so.' And where am I to get bread for him? What claim has he? Am I a millionaire to feed every drunkard that passes? They are half blind with spite. They have no cross on them, the devils. They'll give you a clout on the ear and not think twice about it. Give us bread. Well, one gives it. One is not going to fight with them, the idols. Some of them are 2 yards across the shoulders, and a great fist as big as your boot, and you see the sort of figure I am. One of them could smash me with his little finger. Well, one gives him bread, and he gobbles it up and stretches out full length across the hut with not a word of thanks. And there are some that ask for money. Tell me, where is your money? As though I had money. How should I come by it? "A forester and no money," laughed the hunter. "You get wages every month, and I'll be bound you sell timber on the sly." Artyom took a timid sideway glance at his visitor and twitched his beard as a magpie twitches her tail. "You are still young to say a thing like that to me," he said. "You will have to answer to God for those words. Whom may your people be? Where do you come from?" "I am from Vyazovka. I am the son of Nefed, the village elder." "You have gone out for sport with your gun. I used to like sport too when I was young." "Ah, our sins are grievous," said Artyom with a yawn. "It's a sad thing. There are few good folks, but villains and murderers no end. God have mercy upon us." "You seem to be frightened of me too." "Come, what next? What should I be afraid of you for?" "I see. I understand. You came in, and not just anyhow, but you made the sign of the cross. You bowed, all decent and proper. I understand. One can give you bread. I am a widower. I don't heat the stove. I sold the samovar. I am too poor to keep meat or anything else, but bread you are welcome to." At that moment, something began growling under the bench. The growl was followed by a hiss. Artyom started, drew up his legs, and looked inquiringly at the hunter. "It's my dog worrying your cat," said the hunter. "You devils," he shouted under the bench. "Lie down. You'll be beaten. I say, your cat's thin, mate. She is nothing but skin and bone." "She is old. It is time she was dead. So you say you are from Vyazovka?" "I see you don't feed her. Though she's a cat, she's a creature. Every breathing thing. You should have pity on her." "You are a queer lot in Vyazovka," Artyom went on, as though not listening. "The church has been robbed twice in 1 year. To think that there are such wicked men. So they fear neither man nor God. To steal what is the Lord's. Hanging's too good for them. In old days, the governors used to have such rogues flogged. However you punish, whether it is with flogging or anything else, it will be no good. You will not knock the wickedness out of a wicked man. Save and preserve us, Queen of Heaven. The forester sighed abruptly. Save us from all enemies and evildoers. Last week at Volovi Zaimishchi, a mower struck another on the chest with his scythe. He killed him outright. And what was it all about, God bless me? One mower came out of the tavern, drunk. The other met him, drunk too. The young man, who had been listening attentively, suddenly started, and his face grew tense as he listened. "Stay!" he said, interrupting the forester. "I fancy someone is shouting." The hunter and the forester fell to listening with their eyes fixed on the window. Through the noise of the forest, they could hear sounds such as the strained ear can always distinguish in every storm, so that it was difficult to make out whether people were calling for help or whether the wind was wailing in the chimney. But the wind tore at the roof, tapped at the paper on the window, and brought a distinct shout of, "Help!" "Talk of your murderers," said the hunter, turning pale and getting up. "Someone is being robbed." "Lord have mercy on us," whispered the forester, and he too turned pale and got up. The hunter looked aimlessly out of window and walked up and down the hut. "What a night! What a night!" he muttered. "You can't see your hand before your face. The very time for a robbery. Do you hear? There is a shout again." The forester looked at the icon, and from the icon turned his eyes upon the hunter and sank onto the bench, collapsing like a man terrified by sudden bad news. "Good Christian," he said in a tearful voice, "you might go into the passage and bolt the door, and we must put out the light." "What for?" "By ill luck they may find their way here. Oh, our sins! We ought to be going, and you talk of bolting the door. You are a clever one. Are you coming?" The hunter threw his gun over his shoulder and picked up his cap. "Get ready! Take your gun! Hey, Flurker, here!" he called to his dog. "Flurker!" A dog with long, frayed ears, a mongrel between a setter and a house dog, came out from under the bench. He stretched himself by his master's feet and wagged his tail. "Why are you sitting there?" cried the hunter to the forester. "You mean to say you are not going?" "Where?" "To help." "How can I?" said the forester with a wave of his hand, shuddering all over. "I can't bother about it." "Why won't you come?" "After talking of such dreadful things, I won't stir a step into the darkness. Bless them. And what should I go for?" "What are you afraid of? Haven't you got a gun? Let us go, please do. It's scaring to go alone. It will be more cheerful, the two of us. Do you hear? There was a shout again. Get up!" "Whatever do you think of me, lad?" wailed the forester. "Do you think I am such a fool to go straight to my undoing?" "So you are not coming?" The forester did not answer. The dog, probably hearing a human cry, gave a plaintive whine. "Are you coming, I ask you?" cried the hunter, rolling his eyes angrily. "You do keep on, upon my word," said the forester with annoyance. "Go yourself." "Ugh, low cur," growled the hunter, turning towards the door. "Flurker, here." He went out and left the door open. The wind flew into the hut. The flame of the candle flickered uneasily, flared up, and went out. As he bolted the door after the hunter, the forester saw the puddles in the track, the nearest pine trees, and the retreating figure of his guest, lighted up by a flash of lightning. Far away, he heard the rumble of thunder. "Holy, holy, holy," whispered the forester, making haste to thrust the thick bolt into the great iron rings. "What weather the Lord has sent us!" Going back into the room, he felt his way to the stove, lay down, and covered himself from head to foot. Lying under the sheepskin and listening intently, he could no longer hear the human cry, but the peals of thunder kept growing louder and more prolonged. He could hear the big, wind-lashed raindrops pattering angrily on the panes and on the paper of the window. "He's gone on a fool's errand," he thought, picturing the hunter soaked with rain and stumbling over the tree stumps. I bet his teeth are chattering with terror." Not more than 10 minutes later, there was a sound of footsteps, followed by a loud knock at the door. "Who's there?" cried the forester. "It's I," he heard the young man's voice. "Unfasten the door." The forester clambered down from the stove, felt for the candle, and lighting it, went to the door. The hunter and his dog were drenched to the skin. They had come in for the heaviest of the downpour, and now the water ran from them as from washed clothes before they have been wrung out. "What was it?" asked the forester. "A peasant woman driving in a cart. She had got off the road," answered the young man, struggling with his breathlessness. "She was caught in a thicket." "Ah, the silly thing. She was frightened then. Well, did you put her on the road?" "I don't care to talk to a scoundrel like you." The young man flung his wet cap on the bench and went on. "I know now that you are a scoundrel and the lowest of men, and you a keeper too, getting a salary, you blackguard." The forester slunk with a guilty step to the stove, cleared his throat, and lay down. The young man sat on the bench, thought a little, and lay down on it full length. Not long afterwards he got up, put out the candle, and lay down again. During a particularly loud clap of thunder, he turned over, spat on the floor, and growled out, "He's afraid. And what if the woman were being murdered? Whose business is it to defend her? And he an old man too, and a Christian. He's a pig, and nothing else." The forester cleared his throat and heaved a deep sigh. Somewhere in the darkness, Flurker shook his wet coat vigorously, which sent drops of water flying about all over the room. "So you wouldn't care if the woman were murdered?" the hunter went on. "Well, strike me, God. I had no notion you were that sort of man." A silence followed. The thunderstorm was by now over, and the thunder came from far away, but it was still raining. "And suppose it hadn't been a woman, but you shouting help," said the hunter, breaking the silence. "How would you feel, you beast, if no one ran to your aid? You have upset me with your meanness. Plague take you." After another long interval, the hunter said, "You must have money to be afraid of people. A man who is poor is not likely to be afraid." "For those words you will answer before God," Artyom said hoarsely from the stove. "I have no money." "I dare say. Scoundrels always have money. Why are you afraid of people, then? So you must have. I'd like to take and rob you for spite, to teach you a lesson." Artyom slipped noiselessly from the stove, lighted a candle, and sat down under the holy image. He was pale and did not take his eyes off the hunter. "Here, I'll rob you," said the hunter, getting up. "What do you think about it? Fellows like you want a lesson. Tell me, where is your money hidden?" Artyom drew his legs up under him and blinked. "What are you wriggling for? Where is your money hidden? Have you lost your tongue, you fool? Why don't you answer?" The young man jumped up and went up to the forester. "He is blinking like an owl. Well, give me your money, or I will shoot you with my gun." "Why do you keep on at me?" squealed the forester, and big tears rolled from his eyes. "What's the reason of it? God sees all. You will have to answer for every word you say to God. You have no right whatever to ask for my money." The young man looked at Artyom's tearful face, frowned, and walked up and down the hut, then angrily clapped his cap on his head and picked up his gun. "Ugh! It makes me sick to look at you," he filtered through his teeth. "I can't bear the sight of you. I won't sleep in your house anyway. Goodbye. Hey, Flurker." The door slammed and the troublesome visitor went out with his dog. Artyom bolted the door after him, crossed himself, and lay down. The Schoolmaster, a short story by Anton Chekhov. Fyodor Lukich Sysoev, the master of the factory school maintained at the expense of the firm of Kulikin, was getting ready for the annual dinner. Every year after the school examination, the board of managers gave a dinner at which the inspector of elementary schools, all who had conducted the examinations, and all the managers and foremen of the factory were present. In spite of their official character, these dinners were always good and lively, and the guests sat a long time over them. Forgetting distinctions of rank and recalling only their meritorious labours, they ate till they were full, drank amicably, chattered till they were all hoarse and parted late in the evening, deafening the whole factory settlement with their singing and the sound of their kisses. Of such dinners Sisoev had taken part in 13, as he had been that number of years master of the factory school. Now, getting ready for the 14th, he was trying to make himself look as festive and correct as possible. He had spent a whole hour brushing his new black suit and spent almost as long in front of a looking-glass while he put on a fashionable shirt. The studs would not go into the buttonholes, and this circumstance called forth a perfect storm of complaints, threats, and reproaches addressed to his wife. His poor wife, bustling round him, wore herself out with her efforts, and indeed he too was exhausted in the end. When his polished boots were brought him from the kitchen, he had not strength to pull them on. He had to lie down and have a drink of water. "How weak you have grown," sighed his wife. "You ought not to go to this dinner at all." "No advice, please," the schoolmaster cut her short angrily. He was in a very bad temper, for he had been much displeased with the recent examinations. The examinations had gone off splendidly. All the boys of the senior division had gained certificates and prizes. Both the managers of the factory and the government officials were pleased with the results. But that was not enough for the schoolmaster. He was vexed that Babkin, a boy who never made a mistake in writing, had made 3 mistakes in the dictation. Sergeyev, another boy, had been so excited that he could not remember 17 times 13. The inspector, a young and inexperienced man, had chosen a difficult article for dictation, and Lyapunov, the master of a neighbouring school, whom the inspector had asked to dictate, had not behaved like a good comrader, but in dictating had, as it were, swallowed the words and had not pronounced them as written. After pulling on his boots with the assistance of his wife, and looking at himself once more in the looking-glass, the schoolmaster took his gnarled stick and set off for the dinner. Just before the factory manager's house, where the festivity was to take place, he had a little mishap. He was taken with a violent fit of coughing. He was so shaken by it that the cap flew off his head and the stick dropped out of his hand, and when the school inspector and the teachers, hearing his cough, ran out of the house, he was sitting on the bottom step, bathed in perspiration. "Fyodor Lukitch, is that you?" said the inspector, surprised. "You have come." "Why not?" "You ought to be at home, my dear fellow. You are not at all well today." "I am just the same today as I was yesterday, and if my presence is not agreeable to you, I can go back." "Oh, Fyodor Lukitch, you must not talk like that. Please come in. Why, the function is really in your honour, not ours, and we are delighted to see you. Of course we are." Within, everything was ready for the banquet. In the big dining room adorned with German oleographs and smelling of geraniums and varnish, there were 2 tables, a larger one for the dinner and a smaller one for the hors d'oeuvres. The hot light of midday faintly percolated through the lowered blinds. The twilight of the room, the Swiss views on the blinds, the geraniums, the thin slices of sausage on the plates, all had a naive, girlishly sentimental air, and it was all in keeping with the master of the house, a good-natured little German with a round little stomach and affectionate, oily little eyes. Adolf Andreich Bruni, that was his name, was bustling round the table of hors d'oeuvres as zealously as though it were a house on fire, filling up the wine-glasses, loading the plates, and trying in every way to please, to amuse, and to show his friendly feelings. He clapped people on the shoulder, looked into their eyes, chuckled, rubbed his hands, in fact was as ingratiating as a friendly dog. "Whom do I behold? Fyodor Lukitch," he said in a jerky voice on seeing Sisoev. "How delightful. You have come in spite of your illness. Gentlemen, let me congratulate you. Fyodor Lukitch has come." The school teachers were already crowding round the table and eating the hors d'oeuvres. Sisoev frowned. He was displeased that his colleagues had begun to eat and drink without waiting for him. He noticed among them Lyapunov, the man who had dictated at the examination, and going up to him began. It was not acting like a comrade, No, indeed. Gentlemanly people don't dictate like that. Good Lord, you are still harping on it, said Lyapunov, and he frowned. Aren't you sick of it? Yes, still harping on it. My Babkin has never made mistakes. I know why you dictated like that. You simply wanted my pupils to be flawed so that your school might seem better than mine. I know all about it. Why are you trying to get up a quarrel? Lyapunov snarled. Why the devil do you pester me? Come, gentlemen, interposed the inspector, making a woebegone face. Is it worthwhile to get so heated over a trifle? 3 mistakes, not 1 mistake. Does it matter? Yes, it does matter. Babkin has never made mistakes. He won't leave off, Lyapunov went on, snorting angrily. He takes advantage of his position as an invalid and worries us all to death. Well, sir, I am not going to consider your being ill. Let my illness alone, cried Sysoev angrily. What is it to do with you? They all keep repeating it at me. Illness, illness, illness. As though I need your sympathy. Besides, where have you picked up the notion that I am ill? I was ill before the examinations, that's true, but now I have completely recovered. There is nothing left of it but weakness. You have regained your health. Well, thank God, said the scripture teacher, Father Nikolai, a young priest in a foppish cinnamon-coloured cassock and trousers outside his boots. You ought to rejoice, but you are irritable and so on. You are a nice one too, Sysoev interrupted him. Questions ought to be straightforward, clear, but you kept asking riddles. That's not the thing to do. By combined efforts, they succeeded in soothing him and making him sit down to the table. He was a long time making up his mind what to drink, and pulling a wry face drank a wine-glass of some green liqueur. Then he drew a bit of pie towards him and sulkily picked out of the inside an egg with onion on it. At the first mouthful, it seemed to him that there was no salt in it. He sprinkled salt on it and at once pushed it away, as the pie was too salt. At dinner, Sysoev was seated between the inspector and Bruni. After the first course, the toasts began, according to the old established custom. I consider it my agreeable duty, the inspector began, to propose a vote of thanks to the absent school wardens, Daniel Petrovitch and Ivan Petrovitch, Bruni prompted him, and Ivan Petrovitch Kulikin, who grudge no expense for the school, and I propose to drink their health. For my part, said Bruni, jumping up as though he had been stung, I propose a toast to the health of the honoured inspector of elementary schools, Pavel Gennadievich Nadarov. Chairs were pushed back, faces beamed with smiles, and the usual clinking of glasses began. The third toast always fell to Sysoev, and on this occasion, too, he got up and began to speak. Looking grave and clearing his throat, he first of all announced that he had not the gift of eloquence and that he was not prepared to make a speech. Further, he said that during the 14 years that he had been schoolmaster, there had been many intrigues, many underhand attacks, and even secret reports on him to the authorities, and that he knew his enemies and those who had informed against him, and he would not mention their names for fear of spoiling somebody's appetite. That in spite of these intrigues, the Kulikin school held the foremost place in the whole province, not only from a morale, but also from a material point of view. Everywhere else, he said, schoolmasters get 200 or 300 rubles, while I get 500, and moreover my house has been redecorated and even furnished at the expense of the firm. And this year all the walls have been repapered. Further, the schoolmaster enlarged on the liberality with which the pupils were provided with writing materials in the factory schools as compared with the Zemstvo and government schools. And for all this the school was indebted, in his opinion, not to the heads of the firm, who lived abroad and scarcely knew of its existence, but to a man who, in spite of his German origin and Lutheran faith, was a Russian at heart. Sysoev spoke at length, with pauses to get his breath and with pretensions to rhetoric, and his speech was boring and unpleasant. He several times referred to certain enemies of his, tried to drop hints, repeated himself, coughed, and flourished his fingers unbecomingly. At last he was exhausted and in a perspiration, and he began talking jerkily, in a low voice as though to himself, and finished his speech not quite coherently. "And so I propose the health of Bruni, that is Adolf Andreich, who is here among us. Generally speaking, you understand." When he finished, everyone gave a faint sigh, as though someone had sprinkled cold water and cleared the air. Bruni alone apparently had no unpleasant feeling. Beaming and rolling his sentimental eyes, the German shook Sisoev's hand with feeling and was again as friendly as a dog. "Oh, I thank you," he said, with an emphasis on the "oh," laying his left hand on his heart. "I am very happy that you understand me. I, with my whole heart, wish you all things good. But I ought only to observe, you exaggerate my importance. The school owes its flourishing condition only to you, my honored friend, Fyodor Lukich. But for you, it would be in no way distinguished from other schools. You think the German is paying a compliment? The German is saying something polite. Ha ha! No, my dear Fyodor Lukich, I am an honest man and never make complimentary speeches. If we pay you 500 rubles a year, it is because you are valued by us. Isn't that so? Gentlemen, what I say is true, isn't it? We should not pay anyone else so much. Why? A good school is an honor to the factory." "I must sincerely own that your school is really exceptional," said the inspector. "Don't think this is flattery. Anyway, I have never come across another like it in my life. As I sat at the examination, I was full of admiration. Wonderful children. They know a great deal and answer brightly, and at the same time they are somehow special, unconstrained, sincere. One can see that they love you, Fyodor Lukich. You are a schoolmaster to the marrow of your bones. You must have been born a teacher. You have all the gifts, innate vocation, long experience, and love for your work. It's simply amazing, considering the weak state of your health, what energy, what understanding, what perseverance. Do you understand? What confidence you have. Someone in the school committee said truly that you were a poet in your work. Yes, a poet you are." And all present at the dinner began as one man talking of Sisoev's extraordinary talent. And as though a dam had been burst, there followed a flood of sincere, enthusiastic words, such as men do not utter when they are restrained by prudent and cautious sobriety. Sisoev's speech and his intolerable temper and the horrid, spiteful expression on his face were all forgotten. Everyone talked freely, even the shy and silent new teachers, poverty-stricken, downtrodden youths who never spoke to the inspector without addressing him as "Your Honor." It was clear that in his own circle, Sisoev was a person of consequence. Having been accustomed to success and praise for the 14 years that he had been schoolmaster, he listened with indifference to the noisy enthusiasm of his admirers. It was Bruni who drank in the praise instead of the schoolmaster. The German caught every word, beamed, clapped his hands, and flushed modestly, as though the praise referred not to the schoolmaster, but to him. "Bravo! Bravo!" he shouted. "That's true. You have grasped my meaning. Excellent." He looked into the schoolmaster's eyes as though he wanted to share his bliss with him. At last he could restrain himself no longer. He leapt up, and overpowering all the other voices with his shrill little tenor, shouted, "Gentlemen, allow me to speak. Shh! To all you say I can make only one reply. The management of the factory will not be forgetful of what it owes to Fyodor Lukich." All were silent. Sisoev raised his eyes to the German's rosy face. "We know how to appreciate it," Bruni went on, dropping his voice. "In response to your words, I ought to tell you that Fyodor Lukich's family will be provided for, and that a sum of money was placed in the bank a month ago for that object." Sisoev looked inquiringly at the German, at his colleagues, as though unable to understand why his family should be provided for and not he himself. And at once on all the faces, in all the motionless eyes bent upon him, he read not the sympathy, not the commiseration which he could not endure, but something else, something soft, tender, but at the same time intensely sinister, like a terrible truth, something which in one instant turned him cold all over and filled his soul with unutterable despair. With a pale, distorted face, he suddenly jumped up and clutched at his head. For a quarter of a minute he stood like that, stared with horror at a fixed point before him, as though he saw the swiftly coming death of which Bruni was speaking, then sat down and burst into tears. "Come, come! What is it?" he heard agitated voices saying. "Water! Drink a little water!" A short time passed, and the schoolmaster grew calmer, but the party did not recover their previous liveliness. The dinner ended in gloomy silence, and much earlier than on previous occasions. When he got home, Sisoev first of all looked at himself in the glass. Of course there was no need for me to blubber like that, he thought, looking at his sunken cheeks and his eyes with dark rings under them. My face is a much better colour today than yesterday. I am suffering from anemia and catarrh of the stomach, and my cough is only a stomach cough. Reassured, he slowly began undressing and spent a long time brushing his new black suit, then carefully folded it up and put it in the chest of drawers. Then he went up to the table where there lay a pile of his pupils' exercise books, and picking out Babkin's, sat down and fell to contemplating the beautiful childish handwriting. And meantime, while he was examining the exercise books, the district doctor was sitting in the next room and telling his wife in a whisper that a man ought not to have been allowed to go out to dinner who had not in all probability more than a week to live.